Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Sustainability Cafe. I'm Keerthana, editor of Waste and Recycling, and the host for today. COP30 concluded last week in Brazil, and it was a mixed bag in many ways, but it did deliver some of the encouraging outcomes. The climate summit saw renewed focus on climate finance for developing nations, progress on methane reduction, and new partnerships aimed at accelerating the transition to clean energy industries. One of the most significant outcomes was the Belém 4X pledge, a commitment by countries to quadruple renewable energy capacity by 2030, a step that many believe could redefine the global energy landscape. To unpack what clean energy transition entails and to explain why it is critical for climate action, we are joined today by Professor Tadhg O'Donovan, Chief Scientist and Deputy Principal at Heriot-Watt University, Dubai. Professor, thank you for joining us today.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
Uh, Professor, let me straight away dive into my first question to you. Coming out of COP30, what new global commitments do you think will most significantly accelerate renewable energy deployment in emerging economies? And what makes those particular commitments impactful?
It's probably worth, first of all, considering what COP is in the first place. It is essentially about collective action and countries around the world coming together to address what is a critical global challenge. So COP is that opportunity annually where people come together to address what is a really, really complex system, something that's going to affect us all, no matter where we live, and in very, very different ways. So COP essentially is there to address how each individual nation will need to set its own targets towards a more sustainable future, while also recognizing that no two nations are identical in this. We all have different needs, we have all got different legacies from the past, and we have also different pressures and opportunities that are needed to take those forward. It's only obviously by listening and understanding that we can do this in an equitable way, that we can fully understand the different roles that different countries will have to play to address that, as I said, global challenge that is going to affect us all. And that's what's important about COP.
Yeah, very well said. No two nation is same, and the challenges that each nation face is different, and the commitments each nation is making is really wonderful. Um, and moving on to my next question to you, the first global stock take showed the world that it is still off track to
Yes.
meet the 1.5 degree the goal. What key lessons should policymakers and researchers like you and your colleagues take from this assessment? And how can science actually help drive more effective climate action before 2030?
So the global stocktake is so very important because it assesses where we are today against how we're doing towards tomorrow. Now, on an annual basis, the qualities of life, the way in which we engage, it's always changing and largely improving. And we are making more sustainable decisions, absolutely. But we need to understand where we are relative to where we said we would be, and also where we need to be to remain within 1.5 degrees temperature rise, which is the ultimate the commitment here. And largely we're off track. All right, we now know that our emissions will need to fall by 43% based on 2019 levels if we are to stay within those 2019 targets. So understanding where we need to be. So we need to do that global stocktake. We need to appreciate it, and if anything, that will give the element of emergency, the need for quick, swift action. And when we do things swiftly, you'll probably hear me say this a few times, it will be how do we do that in an equitable way, in a fair way, in a way that's also, and I would also add this, that is realizable, something that isn't fanciful, that is something that we can genuinely commit to and do together. So the stocktake is important. It's like anything, we want to understand what is our current state of health, but we also need to understand that there's a real challenge there, and that if we don't make realistic, I suppose, ambitions or realistic actions here, that we won't achieve what we all know we have to do.
Right. Coming to my second part of the questions, what, uh, how can researchers help, or how can science guide more effective climate action before 2030?
So this is really really important that we consider the thing holistically. And this is, I'm going to speak a little bit about what Heriot-Watt does, um, because it perhaps gives you an indication of how complex the challenge is, and then the approach that you need to take to do something like this. Now, we as an institution, just as a bit of background, we have our heritage in Scotland. So in the UK, in Europe, we have a significant campus here in Dubai, in the Middle East, and we have one in Malaysia. Three very different environments, three very different communities, and we all have our different challenges. I'm going to come to this kind of holistic approach that we now need to take to this. So I'm actually an engineer, and I tend to think about technology, and I'm particularly I work in solar, so I'm thinking about the role that solar might have to play. And if I do that in isolation, if I do that in terms of how many gigawatt hours I can get out of a solar panel or a solar field, then I might not address the challenge fully, because I need to think of it from a techno-economic perspective. I need to make sure that if we're going to have the full adoption and deployment of solar, that it must be affordable. It has to have a good return on investment. It has to work for and with people. And that actually brings in the more societal challenge about it, right? So much is to do with human factors. How am I going to, as an individual, play my part by adopting of solar, by making greener, cleaner choices, by being more informed about what I can do, and how I, as a researcher, am developing technology and working to explain that more widely. So I guess the science here I'm trying to make a case for is not a unique product or a silver bullet. It's how the sciences work across disciplines, from business and enterprise to technology, perhaps more my field, to human factors. And then how do we do that across very different environments, from, and in Heriot-Watt's case, let's say the cold north of Scotland, to the desert heat here in the Middle East, to the tropical environment that we have in Malaysia. That's just a little insight into the challenges that researchers are working on, and doing so in this kind of collaborative interdisciplinary approach.
Yeah. It's wonderful that you mentioned about the equity. I mean, the holistic approach, that it works for everybody in the world. It's
Yes.
a global challenge and it should work for everybody, whether you're based out of Dubai or you're based out of North America or wherever. So that also brings us to the question of just transition.
Yes.
COP, yes, and COP30 rightfully established just transition mechanism, marking a significant step towards climate justice. From your perspective, what does a fair and inclusive energy transition truly look like?
So it's a challenge, because it brings together so many different aspects. It brings in legacy. So who has in the past, maybe the more industrialized nations might have contributed more to the problem since the Industrial Revolution, perhaps. Um, so that's one challenge. Do we recognize the role that different economies and developed nations have had, perhaps disproportionately to the challenge now? We also have developing economies, and should they, we do not want to curtail. That would not be fair. Curtail their development and in improving, living standards wherever we are in the world. Now, we also have to balance that about who would largely be affected by climate change. And what we're finding is that, perhaps island nations, as an example, might be more disproportionately affected to perhaps more resilient, wealthier, developed nations. So those are the aspects, and it's important, nearly like a stock take, that we first of all appreciate the challenges that we have here, and that we step through a fair and just transition in by fully recognizing what that challenge is. That we don't hold everybody to the exact same quality and standards to this, that we appreciate the disproportionate effect that it would have on different nations, different parts of the world, while also recognizing the disproportionate contribution that some of the more developed nations might have had there. So hugely challenging, But I'm a firm believer in diagnosing a challenge first, understanding what that challenge is before we then move or step into addressing that challenge in a fair and equitable way.
Absolutely. If the problem is identified, it is almost half solved.
Half there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Professor Professor Tadhg, in your field, what new or emerging technologies hold the most promise for accelerating the global energy transition, maybe over the next decade?
So there's a huge amount of technology out there. And I'm going to talk particularly about like green and clean technology. I am the chief scientist of Heriot-Watt, and my tenure has been about green and clean technology. We're going on our own transition in Heriot-Watt. So we use about 100 gigawatt hours annually across our campuses, stretching from Malaysia to the UAE and of course in the UK as well. So what technologies are we coming up? Well, it's not a simple answer. There isn't one. There isn't one singular one, but we have to adapt technologies into the environment. So really, a lot of the approach here has to be about deciding on the process that you would go through. So let me give you an example. We need to first of all appraise our need and the human factors that we have. We also need to appraise our resource, what's around us, and we need to use the technology to bridge between the resources that are locally, the renewable energy resources, and that need. And then you want to optimize that bridge. And that bridge could be the technology. So let's say in my area, which is solar, perhaps solar with some amount of storage, how do I optimize it? Do I optimize it based on cost? Probably yes, because that's going to be one of the major levers that's going to lead to wider adoption. Do I optimize it based on energy efficiency, also embodied carbon? How much carbon has been involved in that solution? I'm happy to discuss that one in a minute as well. So what we're finding is that we're coming up with very different solutions in very different parts of the world. And if I was to extrapolate that example a little bit further, I would say here in the Middle East, we have an abundance of solar energy resource.
Right.
We have a need for cooling largely. We want to cool our environment so they're more hospitable or more easy to live in, and we're looking for that kind of thermal comfort. So we need to have energy to reduce the temperature in our built environment. So solar to me plays a massive part in this. How do we integrate solar into our built environment? How do we have widespread solar out in desert land potentially that is cheaper largely than the built environment? And how do we connect that in? And then we think about the human factors of it all. So part of the bridge and optimization of the bridge might be in how do we use that energy? So we're using it to store it in electric vehicles because there's battery storage in that. Are we reducing our demand by building better environments that are more thermally insulated? Are we able to optimize the energy generation from a solar panel? So that's an example of how it's deployed. I would give you a very different example if I was talking about wind in Scotland that is looking to heat buildings in Edinburgh. So, but what's important to us is this kind of systems approach and systems optimization that would have the maximum impact that works in different environments. There isn't one technology that will do it. There will be technologies that work together as a system that can be optimized dependent on the needs and the environmental resource.
Wonderful. Professor, can you also talk about the cost, the aspects of these technologies, that whether they could be incorporated across board? What is the status of when we talk about the costs that comes with these technologies?
Cost is such an important driver for any renewable energy technology and an energy transition. It's a different cost base to what you might consider in, say, fossil fuel energy generation. We're largely fossil fuel generation after some capital investment in, let's say, the power plant. But the largest element of the energy or the cost of the unit of energy is still in the fuel itself, the gas or the coal that's being burnt. Renewables generally are capital intensive, so you will pay a significant amount upfront at the beginning of the project for, let's say, solar or wind or biomass. And then you reap the rewards in their operation over their life cycle. Now, that can be a very positive sum, and you're talking about return on investment here. You
Yeah.
also need to give confidence to investors that the unit cost of energy over its lifetime will be lower so that you can be assured of your return on investment. And actually, a lot of the research that we do in this area is about predicting the yield over the duration of let's say, the capital investment of your, let's say, solar power plant. Because if you can give better certainty on the return on investment, well, then you actually drive down the cost of finance. And by driving down the investment or making it a more positive investment, you actually drive down the cost of the energy in and of itself. And as I alluded to in my earlier question, a lot of here, yes, I work in technology, and technology has a lot of solutions, but it's by working with economics, working with business and finance, that you can actually yield, let's say, more impact from an innovation, because you can give confidence to markets, and you can even persuade people that it's a really
Yeah.
good investment to pay your energy bill upfront
Mm.
while benefiting from it over the longer period.
That's very optimistic. Let me shift gear a bit for a moment. Our readers are from the waste management sector, and we there is a general understanding that waste management contributes to climate action, but we
Yes.
would like to unpack it a bit. Uh, so waste is often treated as a local operational issue, but in
Mhm.
reality, it is deeply connected to climate change. How do
Yeah.
you see waste reduction, recycling, and circularity integrating into global climate mitigation strategies?
It's a really, really good question. It's a real big challenge too. I would start by saying that any renewable project, anything to do with the energy transition, we need to take what we'd call a full life cycle analysis on that project. So and I could use any example here, but it's worth me maybe working through a solar example again. Solar panels don't come from nowhere. They come from the extraction of raw materials at the beginning. There will be transport costs, there'll be installation costs, there'll be operation and maintenance issues. They will live a life for maybe 25 years, and then ultimately there will be decommissioning, and there will be recycling, potentially reuse, or maybe even extraction of that raw material for repurposing going forward. Now, it's important from the design stage that we are looking at the thing holistically. So from that full life cycle, from the extraction raw materials to the operation and ultimate decommissioning of it, and what would happen in that. Because again, to your point, understanding diagnosis, it means you're half the battle. It means you can make better decisions from the beginning. And there is huge potential for us to take the raw material in the decommissioning and upcycle it into the latest innovation. Well, we are working in an area here where raw materials are going to be paramount to the energy transition. So as we electrify, we do need more copper. As we're going to store more energy, we're going to need more lithium. So we need these raw materials, and in the decommissioning, those are still available to us as well. So how do we process those materials so that we can reuse and recycle? There is a whole other area, though, of course, because in certain areas, the waste has massive value to us. We're able to use through anaerobic digestion waste
Yeah.
materials to generate biogases, and that's a whole industry in and of itself. So there's power in waste, there's value in waste. So it's not just a challenge. And in a lot of the research that we do here, we obviously take a very positive perspective on the opportunities here of things like waste, which is often seen as, a problem as opposed to an opportunity, something that can actually contribute to, our energy transition.
Right. Um, so you talked about the biogas and which can be derived from waste. There is a lot of developments in this area. We see technologies like waste to energy, biogas, and refuse derived fuel coming up in this region. But there is also a lot of debate around it. From a scientific lens, how viable are these solutions in contributing to net zero targets while still staying environmentally responsible?
They're very vital. So it's established technology. I mean, in one way, it's not new technology. And a lot of the energy transition does not rely on new technology. It might rely on optimization or really getting the most efficient output from this. But anaerobic digestion in and of itself is not a new technology. How can we benefit from it? How can we optimize it? How can we integrate it as part of a larger societal system, on, say, a municipality range? That's where you'll find huge opportunity. And then when you generate the large quantities of, in this case, gas, a biogas, there's great opportunity in that because you can store it. And storage is one of the biggest challenges that we have in, let's say, wind and solar. Because it generates energy when the sun shines or when the wind blows. Whereas in biogas, you have this opportunity to capture that gas. You can even process that gas for use in different applications, from I don't know, transport to burning it again in support of generating electricity, or directly just for heat. So there's huge potential in this. I think scale will have a significant opportunity for how we can do this much more economically. There's value in that. And I think particularly to areas of research strength that we might have in things like logistics. How do you manage waste? How do you process waste? How do you extract the waste to energy? How that valuable product? Then how do you redistribute that to needs? Huge opportunity in the waste that we have, and we should see it that way, as an opportunity.
Thank you for highlighting the opportunities in waste. And thanks for that balanced view where with the right technology and in the right context, I think we can make the best use of waste and as well as the technology. Let's bring the conversation closer to home. Dubai has this ambitious target of
Yes.
100% clean energy by 2050. How close are we really? And what needs to shift scientifically, policy-wise, to get us faster there?
Yeah, I think it's important. Dubai is an interesting place, right? Because it also has population growth. And therefore, extra energy needs, just on a, now we might want to look at it proportionate to population and proportionate to need, or even proportionate to productivity. But either way, Dubai is making significant progress here towards its targets. I think I have some statistics here that it set itself a target of reaching 7% of clean energy mix. They set that back in 2020 and have achieved 8.2%. And since then, they've gone on by 2023 to reach 16.1%. So it's really making significant progress in this area. It's a great environment to work here because I think a lot of this has been driven by need. It's been driven by industry. There's a huge opportunity there. So it's not seen as this must have, as in, but because there's a business opportunity in it, you can see that this market is beginning to accelerate very much. So they've invested, you'll know, of course, of the Al Maktoum solar park that has now reached just short of 3.5 gigawatt capacity with growth expansion. And it does this through a mix of technology. In fact, it has an exhibition center that I always invite people to go to, because it is a real celebration of what technology can do from this, typical solar panel. And we could go into some of the challenges around that technology as well. But also this concentrated solar power, where you have reflectors that concentrate the solar onto a tower and effectively melt salt at a high temperature, around 550 to 600 degrees Celsius, and then use that thermal power to generate steam and electricity in a way that you might be more familiar with, say, gas or coal burning. So there's huge potential there, there's huge investment, and there's plans, of course, to increase the capacity of that solar generation up above 7 gigawatts in the not too distant future as well. So the pace of change here is phenomenal. I think we can have confidence that there's Dubai is on the right path to making, to really addressing, or to making and exceeding its targets as it set them already.
Professor, since hosting COP28, how has the UAE's climate agenda evolved? Are we seeing stronger scientific collaboration, policy action, or innovative ecosystem emerging as a result?
Yeah, listen, COP28 in Dubai and even for the region was just phenomenal. I think it was one of the largest COPs that had been up to date hosted, and it was a place where I felt things changed to this kind of industry-driven, opportunity in the energy transition, looking for investment towards what we all know is a societal challenge, and I genuinely think that's one of the biggest levers that can be pulled and has now been pulled in region. I think it was great for the region to, in the preparation and running up to COP, to more collaboratively bring institutions together. Understanding first of all, what their challenges were, how they could contribute, and even how they might benefit from it. From a university sector, the universities are working much more closely together. As in the run up to COP with the climate network that was established, they have kept in contact and they're working not just through research but through shared challenges, really helping not only to address some of those technological challenges, but educating students, embedding into their curricula sustainable practices so people know as they graduate how important sustainability is. They're more aware of how they can play a role and the impact they can have. So that's how I have noticed it or appreciated it in my role here. But there's so many things that we could point to across the UAE as the legacy of COP28, whether it is the establishment and running of the climate tech hubs, where we're looking for venture capitalists and really investing and supporting new emerging technology that can have a real impact. But even just setting that high bar for the nationally determined contribution, all of these are legacy items that are still living, still happening, and I think the impact of COP28 is going to be with us for a long time, really setting the level of ambition for the country and the call to action, I would say, of multiple stakeholders across the UAE, but also across the region in how they can contribute to mitigating the effects of climate change.
Absolutely. That's really, really fascinating. UAE is, like you mentioned, is strong already in solar and is pushing hard on hydrogen. What do you
Yes.
see as the next frontier, technologically or scientifically, for renewable energy here?
Yeah, I mean, it might not sound like, a major evolution here, but there is something about systems integration where there's huge opportunity. So, because hydrogen doesn't sit alone, or green hydrogen doesn't sit alone, solar doesn't sit alone, they might even work very well together. But how do you optimize those systems on a scale of the city of Dubai or on the scale of the UAE? I think there's huge opportunity in how we might do that. So, from let's say where we live in residential communities to how we use energy, how we store energy, how we, and there's the advent of AI now. We're so data driven. We better appreciate how we generate energy, how we use energy, how we store energy. I think there's huge opportunity in that systems integration that would have an effect. I will say that while hydrogen it has huge potential as a vector,
Mhm.
so as solar, they still, as individuals, have a long way that they can go as well in optimizing solutions back to solar. Solar has good potential, but it also has challenges in the Middle East. Dusting is an issue. High temperatures affect the conversion efficiency. So there's robotics coming in that's helping to
Yeah.
optimize their yield over time. There's a lot of innovation in this space, and it's great to see how quickly it is changing and how many different solutions are coming together. That's what I mean by systems integration, that are having a bigger impact together than they have in isolation.
Yeah, it's an exciting space to be in for sure as a scientist yourself. Um, Professor, thank you so much for the insightful perspective. As the world acts on COP30's outcomes, it's conversations like this that help us understand both the opportunities and challenges. Thank you very much. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on Sustainability Cafe. Stay tuned for more conversations shaping our circular and sustainable future. Thank you.